Hello, I'm Robert Martinez, State Historian of New Mexico. This is New Mexico History in 10 minutes. Let's go back to Mexico in the mid-1500s. Imagine the Valley of Mexico, the great city of the Aztecs, Tenochtitlan. It's now called La Ciudad de Mexico, after the Mexica Indians, the Aztecs. Obviously, there are many different kinds of Native American people in the area. There's a lot of mixed blood people. There's people who are part Native, part Spanish. There are African slaves and free Africans coming over and being brought over, and a lot of Spaniards, okay? And why not? In 1494, 2 years after Cristobal Colon, Christopher Columbus, the Pope in Rome did something quite interesting. He drew an imaginary line down a map of the Atlantic Ocean, or what was known about the Atlantic Ocean, and said, everything over here to the west is Spain. Everything to the right is Portugal. I don't think the native people of the Americas or the African people were asked anything about this, but that's what this Eurocentric, Catholic-centric act did. It divided the world between Portugal and Spain, and that's because the Age of Discovery was not initially a European act. It was Iberian, it was Portuguese, and it was Spanish. Later, we find out an accident of geography will put Brazil under Portuguese authority because it stuck way out into the Atlantic, and they didn't know that at the time. But, you know, what you have going on in the Americas in the 1500s is immigration. Immigration happens when there's no work, where there's no opportunity, where people are living, so they go somewhere else. There's excess population, too many people for the opportunities and resources that are around. That's how it was 50,000 years ago, 5,000 years ago, 500 years ago. That's how immigration was 50 years ago, and even 5 years ago, and down to the present day. People leaving a bad place to go to a better place. So that's what was going on. In Spain, the society was very stratified and hierarchical. The king and queen at the top, then under them the nobles, and under them everyone else. You had the church, very powerful, Pope in Rome, but then you had your powerful archbishops and priests. So what you had in Spain was a union between the crown and the church, a strong marriage, even like a sacramental marriage, very difficult to separate. And so this is what society was like, and this is what will be transported to Mexico and to New Mexico and to all the colonies, this highly hierarchical society. So if you're in Spain and you can't find work as a farmer, as an artisan, as a merchant, as a laborer, then you would get on a ship and sail to the Indies, the Americas, and try to make a better life for yourself over there. And that's what was going on. So you have a lot of Spaniards coming into Mexico. By 1535, the age of the conquistador has ended. And what you have is the beginnings of official Spanish government and church rule, very powerful and very strong. The first viceroy, virrey, vice king of Mexico, Antonio de Mendoza, establishes himself in Mexico City. There's an audiencia that's established. This is like a parliament, a ruling body that advises and rules with the viceroy. And you have an archbishop put in place to rule for Rome, for the Pope, for the church, the Catholic Church. These folks are your high-level Spanish people, nobles, wealthy people, and they come to the Americas and they essentially try to recreate the life they had in Spain. And in Mexico City, you have poor to mid-level, middle-class Spaniards coming to cities like Mexico City, Puebla de Los Angeles, Guadalajara, those first Spanish towns that are in the area. So imagine that. Imagine that what you have is amazing wealth. These Spaniards were ruling over Indians, collecting tribute. Land grants were being handed out. It was like medieval Spain recreated in the Americas. It's quite fascinating because the Spanish imagination had really been stimulated by discovering gold in Mexico. There were a lot of legends in Spain, especially one about 7 bishops who, when the Moors invaded in the 700s, they took some people from the Iberian Peninsula. 7 bishops sailed on 7 ships. They sailed west, never to be seen again. The story was that they landed on a distant island and established 7 cities of gold, of wealth, and were there for centuries. So once the Spaniards had encountered and conquered Mexico City, it didn't seem that far-fetched that there might be other golden cities like Tenochtitlan. There might be 7 cities. Sound familiar? So they thought, well, maybe there's more Mexico. Maybe there's another Mexico, otro Mexico, a Nueva Mexico, a new Mexico. I say Nueva because it was a city. Mexico was not a nation. It was a city. The area was called Nueva España, New Spain, to be just like Old Spain. So this is this situation that you have into the 1530s. And out of the Caribbean, in Cuba, what you have is a lot more exploration going on. So in the 1520s, there's this fever to find more gold, more native peoples to subdue and convert to Catholicism and turn into Spanish subjects. So there's a exploration of the Gulf of Mexico, and one such expedition runs afoul of a hurricane. And in the late 1520s, 2 ships are destroyed, and the survivors land on what's now the Texas coast. About 4 Spaniards and an African Moor. We know the leader was Alvar Núñez Cabeza de Vaca, and the Moor was Esteban or Estebanico. We go back and forth with that name. Well, they go on an odyssey, an epic story that lasts almost a decade. They're wandering through the desert, literally. And they encounter Native American groups, and they are ironically enslaved by natives, and they use their folklore, their superstitious beliefs, their Roman Catholicism, no doubt. Esteban had his ideas brought from Africa, and they use this to survive amongst the native peoples. Well, they go on a journey, they go native, they get tattoos, they dress like the natives, and ultimately they wander through Texas, what's now northern Mexico, and maybe stepped into what we now call New Mexico and Arizona. We're not sure, but they know about these people in the north, these native pueblos, native towns. And when they venture south, a illegal slaving expedition encounters them, thought they were Native Americans and took them south. They said, somos cristianos, we're Christians, and they are taken south and interrogated, and they tell their story, and they say, there are people up there in the north, there are towns, and there very well might be wealth, and this plants the seed for expeditions into the Southwest in the 1540s, 1540 to be exact. The expedition of Francisco Vázquez de Coronado, who came north looking for the 7 cities of gold and wealth. That's it for now. I'll see you next time. Adios.